At my graduation, I was excitedly planning my proposal. I was going to surprise Gina right after the ceremony. But I called her again and again, and she never picked up. Later, I found out that Gina, who was supposed to be there, was at the airport picking up her childhood friend who was coming home. I didn't see her until I showed up at her front door, drenched like a drowned rat. That's when I came face to face with the guy who had just gotten back. He shot me a challenging look. Seeing them holding each other so intimately, unable to part, I understood everything. I sold the ring I'd saved up to buy. I took the cat we had raised together. Later, she found me crying. I planned the proposal you always wanted. I even bought back the rings you sold. Justin, please come back. Okay? I got to Gina's apartment just as they did. The guy was leaning on Gina's shoulder, an intimate and dependent posture. They were wrapped up in each other's arms, holding on as if they couldn't bear to let go. Noticing my gaze, the guy looked up and raised an eyebrow at me. He mouthed, "Hey there, future brother-in-law." Then he planted a loud kiss on Gina's cheek. Gina turned her head with a playful pout. "What are you doing?" I said to him, "Hello." Hearing my voice, Gina's body went rigid. She shoved Edward, the guy leaning on her, away. She turned around stiffly. When she saw me staring at them with a blank expression, her face went pale. "Justin, what are you doing here? You didn't even let me come pick you up." I managed to smile. If I hadn't come, how could I have seen this little show? Before she could say anything, Edward peeked his head out from behind her. "Hey, you must be the little boyfriend Gina's been seeing." He held out his hand to me. "Hi, I'm Edward, Gina's childhood friend. I've heard so much about you. You're just like they said. I just didn't expect." I tilted my head, curious. "Didn't expect what?" He pursed his lips. "I didn't expect you to be so strict with our Gina. It was just a kiss on the cheek. Is it really that big of a deal? You hick." The guy's voice was slick and oily, and his words were sharp. Gina looked at me apologetically. Then she frowned and nudged him with her elbow. Edward stuck his tongue out and rolled his eyes at her. "Sorry, I'm just used to speaking my mind. You won't hold it against me, right, Justin?" He feigned being wronged and lightly tapped her with his fist. Justin didn't even say anything. "Why are you so sensitive? You get a boyfriend and suddenly you're acting all distant with me. What happened to us being thick as thieves?" Gina frowned, looking displeased. "What are you talking about? That was forever ago. Don't say stuff like that in front of my boyfriend. If he gets mad, I'm gonna kill you." Edward pouted. His voice dropped. "Wow, you get a boyfriend and totally forget about the friendship we've had since we were kids. Gina, you're really something else." Gina's expression tensed. "How could you say that? You're my best friend. Justin is my boyfriend. You're both very important to me." Edward was quickly placated. He happily followed behind us, trying to come inside. Gina blocked him at the door. "I already picked you up. Don't you dare go tattling to my mom again. If there's nothing else, you should head home. I need to spend time with my boyfriend." Edward pouted, reluctantly stepping aside. "I haven't even seen your mom yet. I miss her." "I'm not leaving." Then he made a move to enter. Seeing me still standing there, he asked, "Justin, are you coming in too?" I was baffled. I don't recall suddenly having a little brother. Besides, I'm not in the habit of randomly claiming relatives, Mr. Edward. Having no filter isn't the same as being brutally honest. You're about to give brutally honest a bad name. And one more thing. Whether I forgive you or not is my decision. Neither of you has the right to decide that for me. Edward clearly didn't expect me to be so blunt. He stammered for a moment, unable to come up with a response. Then his eyes turned red. Gina, Justin. I'm sorry." Gina stepped in to smooth things over. "Justin, he's been kind of dumb since we were kids. He doesn't even know what that idiom means. He didn't mean anything by it. Don't take it to heart. Okay?" My hands clenched the hem of my shirt. A gust of wind blew by, and I shivered from the cold. Only then did Gina realize I was completely soaked. She started nagging me about not taking care of myself while carefully blow-drying my hair. Machi, our cat, circled my feet, hooking his tail around my pant leg and purring. Mrs. Miller told me Machi threw up. I was in such a rush to get here that I forgot an umbrella. I didn't expect the rain to get so heavy halfway here. Gina frowned. Even if you were worried about Machi, you can't just ignore your own health. What if you get sick? Why didn't you call me? I pushed her hand away and looked up at her. Check your phone. Gina froze for a second, then immediately pulled her phone out of her handbag. A flicker of panic crossed her face. Justin, my phone was on silent. I'm so sorry. Was it something important? I glanced at my bag, where the rings I'd planned to propose with were still tucked away. I shook my head. It's nothing. It was just my graduation today. I wanted you to be there, that's all. Before coming back, I had already cleaned up the scene I had so carefully arranged. I gave the useful stuff to the dorm supervisor downstairs. Everything else I threw in the trash. Gina knelt beside me, her expression sincere. Justin, I promise you'll never be unable to find me again. Hey, isn't this a picture from our tug-of-war competition when we were kids? You little punk, you still have this. Edward came over and threw an arm around Gina's neck. Come look at this. Your face is a total wreck. It's hilarious. Gina let him pull her over without getting angry. She leaned in, playing along. You're one to talk. Look at your face, you look like you're constipated. Edward grinned mischievously and started tickling Gina's side. Gina lost her balance, and they both fell over, laughing. Machi let out a sudden meow. It broke the spell. Only then did Gina belatedly shove Edward off of her. Edward bumped into the wall, looking at her with a wounded expression. I picked Machi up and held him in my arms. Machi, you're being so thoughtless. You're interrupting something important, you know? I looked up at the two of them. Do you need me to give you some space? Maybe I can bring a bed over for you? Gina's face went white, and she shot to her feet. Justin, I just lost my balance. We fell together by accident. Please don't think of us like that. Are you mad that I didn't come to get you today? Edward bit his lip, his face a mask of anger. Justin, why do you have to say such nasty things? Just because she has a boyfriend, she doesn't have the right to have friends anymore? We grew up together. What's wrong with being a little close? People with dirty minds see everything as dirty. I looked at him coldly. You ran around naked as kids, so you're gonna do that now, too? You two are bold enough to fall all over each other in front of me. Who knows what you do behind my back? Edward's eyes reddened. You've gone too far. No wonder they all say you're from a small town and you're a total barbarian. Someone like you doesn't deserve Gina. I grabbed him by the collar. Say that again. Gina shouted at us to stop. That's enough. She frowned. Edward's right. You've gone a little too far. You've had it out for him from the moment you saw him. If you're angry that I didn't answer your calls today, I apologize. Standing behind her, Edward smirked at me. His eyes flashed with triumph. My fists tightened, and blood rushed to my head. I slapped her, sending her head snapping to the side. A red handprint instantly appeared on her fair cheek. Edward roared and lunged at me. I slapped him, too, without a shred of restraint. They both deserved it. Gina sat on the sofa, pressing an ice pack to her face. Edward had stormed out in a flood of tears moments before. The air outside was thick with humidity now. Machi's stomach is a little upset today. Maybe you should wait for better weather to take him, she mumbled. Her words were slurred because of her swollen cheek. Justin, you've hit me, you've yelled at me. Are you done now? She reached out to touch me. I dodged her hand. A flash of impatience crossed her eyes. Are you serious? I already explained everything, didn't I? Edward hasn't been back in forever. Is it so wrong for me, as his friend, to pick him up? She knew. She knew how much I'd been looking forward to today. She had promised me a long time ago. She had held my hand, tracing my fingers, and told me she was going to give me a huge surprise at my graduation. After hearing that, my heart started pounding uncontrollably. Could the surprise be a proposal? So I planned a proposal of my own, waiting for this day when our feelings would meet. Now it had all turned to dust, and she was turning around and blaming me. My chest felt tight, like a stone was lodged in it. For a moment, I was glad she didn't come today, and that this ridiculous proposal never happened. Edward was being vague, saying your friends had good reason to talk about me that way. But I've never even met your friends. Their impression of me comes entirely from you. So I'm a little curious. What am I like in your version of the story? What have you been telling your friends about me? A barbarian? Rude and aggressive? Gina froze. It was just an offhand comment. They exaggerated.
He stared at her silently.
But you've never once mentioned your friends to me offhandedly, including Edward. She looked down, avoiding my gaze. I let out a heavy sigh. I walked past her. Maybe I had never really seen the girlfriend I was so proud of. She hadn't suddenly gone bad. I just suddenly found out. I saw her body tense up immediately. Her voice was tight with anxiety. Are you coming back? Gina and her friends threw a welcome party for Edward. He even sent me a special invitation. I knew what he was up to, but running away isn't my style. A slap for each of them yesterday wasn't nearly enough to cool me down. As it happened, I had just finished a job interview nearby, so I swung by their private room. The moment I pushed the door open, the lively atmosphere inside died. A drunk Edward was slumped against Gina. One of his hands was roaming restlessly around the collar of her blazer. Gina's expression changed, and she quickly pushed his wandering hand away and stood up. What are you doing here? I stared at them, my tone flat. Here to catch a couple of cheaters. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Edward covered his mouth, his eyes welling up with tears. Why would you just accuse people like that? You've gone too far. Gina shot up and pulled me aside. Don't cause a scene. This is Edward's welcome party. Don't ruin it. Edward tugged at his sleeve. Did you see me touching Gina? Don't get the wrong idea. It's no big deal where I've been living abroad. Good friends can do that. Gina's frown deepened. Okay, that's enough. I shook her hand off me. I was just kidding. Why is everyone so serious? I know Gina knows her limits. I looked at Edward. So, what do you think of my girlfriend's body? Edward looked at me with pure scorn. Of course, it's amazing. Gina's body is the best I've ever felt. Gina actually looked a little proud. I laughed. You have to compare things to know what's good. I've only ever felt Gina. I haven't had the chance to feel anyone else. Why don't you let me in on this little game of yours? I smiled at Gina. You can't play favorites, can you? Her face had turned completely dark. I ignored her and called over a few of the female party companions. From the lineup, I picked the two prettiest ones with the best figures. They were more glamorous than Gina, and their presence completely overshadowed her. That's enough. All of you, get out. Gina yelled at them. Sensing the hostile atmosphere, they apologized to me profusely and ran out without a second glance. Too bad. Didn't even get to touch them. But I memorized their faces. Next time, I'm definitely requesting you too. I looked at her, amused. I was just playing the same game you two were. What are you so angry about? She apologized to me through gritted teeth. She pulled me over to a seat. The others started to change the subject. Soon, the conversation turned to me and Gina. Edward cleared his throat. Justin, this is my welcome party. Everyone has performed a little something for me. Since you're here, you should perform something too. He then waited, gloating. I really don't have any talents. I'm tone deaf and completely uncoordinated. All my skill points went into studying. Just getting from my small hometown to this dazzling, decadent metropolis felt like it had used up all my luck, which is probably why I ended up with this bunch of losers. My background became their weapon against me. It made me the barbarian in the mouths of Gina and her friends. Gina forced a smile. Just sing a simple song. It's not hard. We all just sang a few songs. Edward shouted excitedly. Bro, I want to hear a Taylor Swift song. Her friends started chattering, picking songs. They argued for a while about what I should sing. Finally, they settled on a classic known for its high notes and for being incredibly easy to mess up. Gina frowned slightly but said nothing. You're not gonna back out, are you, bro? Don't be a buzzkill. Edward raised an eyebrow at me. I stood up and walked toward him, step by step. Who said I was going to sing? Then what are you going to do? I picked up a wine bottle. I'm going to give everyone a performance of me beating the hell out of these two cheating scumbags. Unlucky in love, lucky in my career. I woke up rubbing my aching head. I skipped past the long string of accusatory texts from Gina. I clicked on the pin chat with the HR rep. Congratulations on the job offer. Please report to work next Monday. I leaped out of bed, overjoyed. My joy was short-lived. My doorbell started ringing insistently. I opened the door to find Gina's grim face. I sighed and was about to close the door. She stuck her foot in the way and squeezed inside. She sat on the sofa, looking exhausted, and rubbed her temples. You really went too far yesterday. You made such a scene that my parents already know. Justin, go apologize to Edward, and I'll handle my parents. I just stared at her coldly. Gina's tone was impatient. Don't throw a tantrum this time. Normally, I can tolerate whatever you do, but you shouldn't have embarrassed me like that in front of my friends. Do you know what they say about you behind my back? They call you a country brute. If this keeps up, you'll never get past my parents. You're putting me in a really difficult position. Are you really that bothered by the guys around me? Edward is just a regular friend. You don't have to be so petty that you can't even tolerate my friends. And you had to call those girls over just to spite me? Was that really necessary? Looking at her deeply furrowed brow, the last trace of bitterness in my heart vanished. A regular friend who tumbles onto the floor with you in public. A regular friend who sticks his hand inside your clothes. Your regular friends are pretty amazing. They can drink and chat with you in public and then sleep with you in private. A cheating bitch and a scumbag. Neither of you is any good. Since you're so fond of each other, I hope you two are locked together forever. Don't come out and ruin anyone else's life. Gina's face flushed red. Justin, don't you go too far. Gina, as of right now, we are broken up. Stop living in your delusional pipe dream. Marry you? You're not worthy. I pushed Gina out the door. I sat numbly, staring out the window. When I was a kid, my favorite thing was sitting in my dad's boxing gym, watching him teach. In his free time, he would teach me, hand over hand, how to throw a punch. He wanted me to take over the gym when I grew up. My mom would always tease, what if you teach Justin to be all rough and tough, and he can't find a girlfriend in the future? My dad would disagree. Boys need to be strong or people will bully them. Our family was happy then, and I lived a carefree life. But those good days were shattered all too soon. I was sent to live with my aunt and uncle. As a small child, I would hide in the storage closet, listening to them fight and break things. Then I would soak my pillow with tears. The next day, I'd go to school alone with dark circles under my eyes. Living without my parents, I was bullied for a long time. I became a hyena that learned to snarl. I learned to let my fists do the talking. I held back the tears in my eyes. I looked out the window into the distance. See? No one can bully me now. They bullied me, so I hit them all back. Your son is brave, right? I had a few days before starting my new job. I had to use this time to get everything ready for Machi. Back in college, a stray cat on campus had a litter of kittens. One of them was especially weak, could never fight its way to its mother's milk. Miraculously, it survived until it was weaned. Then it wobbled along with the mother cat, foraging for food on campus. The little guy was naturally weak and couldn't compete with the other kittens. Often, just as food touched its mouth, it would be snatched away by a stronger kitten. Back then, Gina and I paid special attention to this little one. We always gave it extra food, but it still reached the point where its own mother abandoned it. That night, during a heavy downpour, Gina and I were coming back from outside. We saw it lying alone in the rain. Its nest with the other kittens was just a short distance away. Seeing us, it let out a faint, weak meow. Its head slumped back to the ground. I quickly took off my jacket, and together Gina and I rushed it to the vet. Turned out it had FIP. The mother cat had sensed it wouldn't survive and had abandoned it. The vet said that because it was so small, treatment would likely be futile. But we didn't want to give up. We insisted the doctor treat it. Incredibly, Machi gave us a miracle. Every time we visited, he was doing better. I would hold him, and his soft fur would get all over me. Gina laughed, pointing at the cat hair on my clothes. You two are like a big ball of fluff. The little guy curiously peeked his head out from my arms. I chuckled. Then from now on, your name is Machi. Okay? My roommate had allergies, so Machi temporarily went to live at Gina's place. Thinking of Machi, who was eagerly waiting for me, I packed with even more energy. After that day, we had no contact. I rang the doorbell at Gina's place 3 times before a lazy male voice finally came from inside. Coming. I frowned. As much as I didn't want to see them, I had to make this trip today. Whoa, you're not welcome here. Edward was disheveled, with faint red marks on his neck. He yelled and tried to slam the door. I blocked it with my body. I don't particularly want to be here either, but I have things to do, so move. I pushed the door open and walked in. Edward dramatically leaned against the door. Ah, why are you forcing your way in? Have you no manners? Gina heard the commotion and hurried out from inside. Seeing me, a spark of joy lit up her eyes, which she quickly concealed with a demure frown. What do you need? If you want to get back together, you have to apologize to us. Edward cried out in surprise, and her attention was drawn back to him. Edward, are you okay? Edward's eyes were slightly red as he gently rubbed his arm. Gina looked, and there was indeed a small red patch. She frowned, about to speak. I rolled my eyes. What could possibly be wrong? There's a security camera right above your head. If you're worried, you can check the footage. Edward looked down, avoiding my gaze. I just bumped into it by accident. Gina awkwardly looked away. It's good that you're here. Edward is right here. Apologize to him and we can put this behind us. I laughed out of pure frustration. Do you not look at your phone? Only then did she confusedly pull out her phone. I had told her last night that I was coming to pick up Machi today. I held up the bubble backpack carrier. Were you sleepwalking last night? Who was it that agreed so readily on text? And today you have no idea why I'm here? She frowned, carefully reading through our chat history. I must have had too much to drink last night. I don't remember. I pushed past her. Let me inform you one more time. Gina has been dumped by me, Justin. You're laid off. Edward shook Gina's arm. Gina, look at him. He's so rude, just barging in like this. But Gina stood there, frozen. Her face was pale as she stared in my direction. I didn't care how the two of them were reacting behind me. I went straight upstairs. Machi was sleeping in the pet room. Hearing my footsteps, his little ears twitched. He happily jumped up and ran over, purring at me. I picked him up and buried my face in his fur. Machi was listless. He tried to muster the energy to play with me, but after a moment, he was lethargic again. Seeing me interacting with Machi, Gina put on a smile and tried to tease him with a ball of yarn. But Machi barely paid her any attention. She scratched her head. Mrs. Miller hasn't been here the last couple of days, and Machi's been pretty inactive. But yesterday when we were eating, he kept circling me and meowing. The moment you show up, he doesn't love me anymore. Seeing Machi's abnormal behavior, I asked with a cold face, have you fed Machi these past 2 days? Gina froze. She looked up in shock but didn't dare to meet my eyes. Machi was still whining in my arms. Hearing his weak cries, my eyes welled up with pain and anger.
I roarte her.
How does a hungry cat know how to feed itself? Why don't you starve to death? You two were off being all lovey-dovey, and this is how you treat Machi? Gina said frantically, it's my fault for not taking care of Machi. I ignored her, found the cat food, and refilled his water bowl. Machi devoured the half bowl I poured for him in one go and drank a lot of water before stopping. Once he was full, he jumped onto my lap and meowed at me. Machi, I'm taking you back to our home. Okay? As I was leaving, Gina followed me closely. When I turned back, she grabbed my hand tightly. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to Machi too. The one I've always loved is you, Justin. Edward had been trailing behind us the whole time. Hearing Gina's words, he gritted his teeth and stared at me with hatred. The cursed words died in my throat. Suddenly, it all felt so pointless. I was embarrassed to even admit I had dated someone like this.
I pointed her neck.
Next time you say that, maybe cover up the marks from the last guy. I fought back a wave of nausea. You two make me sick. Genuinely. The small apartment I rented wasn't as big as the pet room Gina had set up for Machi. But Machi seemed thrilled with it all, happily hopping around the room. I took out the cat treats and freeze-dried snacks I had prepared. I hadn't dared to feed him too much earlier, afraid after he'd been starving for so long. Now I had to make it up to him. Machi, I'm gonna work hard and make a lot of money. I'll definitely get you a bigger house then. Okay? Machi meowed as he ate. I took that as a yes. I got rid of everything we had bought together. The designer watches she gave me, many of which I'd never even worn, and this pair of brand new rings. I put them all up on Facebook Marketplace. Because I listed them at a low price and had all the receipts, they sold out quickly. I used the money to buy Machi a mountain of snacks. Gina had been calling me constantly lately. As soon as I blocked one number, she'd call from another. When I didn't answer her calls, she'd send texts. Justin, did you throw away everything I gave you? A screenshot was attached. What's the deal with these rings? The date on the receipt is the day of your graduation. Is there something you haven't told me? Blocked. New number. I just remembered I promised to go to your graduation with you. I can't believe I forgot something so important. I saw pictures of you from that day on the school's online forum. Someone posted that you had set up a proposal. Were you going to propose to me? Justin, look what I've prepared for you. It's the style you said you loved most. I even found the buyer for those rings and bought them back. Will you come? Blocked. New number. It's okay if you don't come. I'll prepare 99 proposals for you. If you don't show up, I'll just keep proposing. It was endlessly annoying. How could someone be so shameless? One day, I was heading out after work to get a new phone number. Right outside my office building, I ran into one of Gina's friends, the one from the private room. There was no avoiding her. I had to face her. Gina's in the hospital from drinking. If you have time, could you go see her? If she's sick, she should see a doctor. I studied finance, not medicine. The woman got agitated. How can you be so cold, heartless, and irresponsible? She drank herself into a perforated stomach because you two broke up. As her friend, even I drank with her. And you two used to be so close. Looking at her face, I remembered. On that day in the private room, she and Edward had been the loudest cheerleaders. I looked at her. You are incredibly rude. Shouting at the entrance of someone's company. Is this the kind of class you city people have? It was quitting time, and people were starting to crowd the entrance. Everyone was staring at her. Her face flushed. I continued. Not only are you rude, but you have no sense of responsibility. You've really mastered the art of shifting blame. Instead of advising her to drink less, you indulged her out of some misguided sense of sisterly loyalty. She ended up in the hospital with a perforated stomach, and that's half your fault. If she had died from the drinking, you'd be the primary person responsible. She's drinking away her sorrows because I dumped her for cheating on me with 2 guys at once. Her own moral corruption is no one's fault but her own. And she's an adult capable of making her own decisions. If she chooses to be reckless without considering the consequences, then the other half of the blame is on her. I shook my head at her. All you do is push the responsibility onto men. You have absolutely no class. Birds of a feather flock together. No wonder Gina is the way she is. With that, I didn't bother to watch the emotions play across her face. I just walked away. After Gina was discharged from the hospital, she came looking for me again. It was my one day off. There was a commotion downstairs. Sounded like someone was proposing. I rolled over and pulled the covers over my head. Then I heard someone shouting my name through a megaphone. My name? I shot up and peered out the window. There was Gina, standing in the middle of a heart made of roses. She was holding a letter. Seeing me, she smiled. She raised her megaphone. Justin, I love you. I never thought Gina would resort to such a cheesy tactic. And her skin had apparently thickened to be tougher than a castle wall. It seemed as if, without concrete evidence of her cheating thrown in her face, she could deny it without batting an eye. I went back into the bathroom and filled a basin with water. Then I took a tray of ice cubes from the freezer. A crowd of onlookers had gathered downstairs. Seeing my setup, they all quickly scattered. But Gina stood her ground, unmoving. She looked up at me with a guilty expression. And then I drenched her. The March wind carried a distinct chill. Some people in the crowd were already starting to feel sorry for her. Watching her put on this act, I fought back my disgust and took a few steps back from the window. I dug through my blocked contacts and found Edward's number. I waited for him to come pick her up. Edward arrived surprisingly fast. He had a fresh wound on his forehead. When Gina saw his injury, her eyes widened in panic. "How did you get hurt?" Edward glanced up at my window. "I heard someone threw cold water on you. I was worried. I was in too much of a hurry and someone bumped into me on the way." Gina examined him carefully. Once she was sure he wasn't seriously hurt, she pushed him away. "You should go back. Put some medicine on it." Edward grabbed her sleeve and began to sob, his head bowed. Suddenly, he staggered and fainted. Gina panicked, forgetting everything else. She scooped Edward up and rushed out of the crowd. The onlookers now understood what was really going on. They started munching on popcorn and muttering curses at Gina as she left. For the next few weeks, I lived in peace. I heard from old friends that Gina had recently gone public with another guy from her social circle. I'm guessing it was Edward. See? Such a convincing act of deep love. Women are better actors than men. She not only fooled everyone around her, but she also fooled herself. But she couldn't fool my gut. How could someone who truly loves you do things to hurt you? Being willing to drink herself into the hospital for me didn't stop her from cheating on me, and it didn't stop her from getting together with another guy. I focused on my work. I didn't let any news about them disrupt my plans. I wanted to go back to my hometown. There comes an age when you start to miss home. This city was vibrant and inclusive, but I always felt a barrier between it and me. The company was planning to open a new branch. I submitted a transfer request to my boss, Ms. Davis. She was stunned when she heard my plan. After all, the new branch was in an undeveloped market. Whether it was a promotion or a banishment was anyone's guess. "Ms. Davis, you know me. The unknown is the one thing I'm not afraid of. Just give me a chance, and I'll fight with everything I have to grab it and climb my way up." Ms. Davis smiled and patted my shoulder. "You young people really have drive." I moved back to Southport with Machi, this place I had left so long ago. I was sent to my uncle's house when I started middle school. It had been over 10 years since I'd been back. The first thing I did after the plane landed was look at a few properties. I promised Machi I'd buy him a big house. Now I could finally make it happen. The new branch office was already established here. The GM, Mr. Lee, added me to the management group chat. I was finally reintegrating into the city where I was born and raised. I never expected to see Gina here again. Who would have thought that a woman with a husband and child would still be hung up on her ex-boyfriend? When I saw her this time, she looked so thin she was almost unrecognizable. Her eyes were sunken, and the whites were shot through with red veins, as if she hadn't slept for days. She stretched her lips into a pained smile. "I haven't seen Machi in so long. I really miss him." When Machi saw his old owner again, he excitedly circled her, sniffing. Gina couldn't stop petting him. "You've taken such good care of him. His coat is so glossy and smooth." I didn't respond. She awkwardly rubbed her nose and started searching for a new topic. "How have you been lately? Are you getting used to being back here?" I took a sip of water. "This is where I grew up. The first time I met your parents, the whole table was covered in spicy food. I managed to eat that meal. Why wouldn't I be used to being back in my own home?" Gina was speechless. "I was inconsiderate. I'm sorry you had to go through that." I put my glass down. "You were inconsiderate. And you were inconsiderate about a lot more than just that. Which is why I ran for my life." Her gaunt face turned even paler. I smiled, pleased. I had no desire to know how those two were doing over the years, but they were just too bizarre to ignore. Old friends would tell me stories about them as a joke from time to time. And honestly, hearing about their drama-filled lives was pretty satisfying. Apparently, Gina found out she was infertile. Around the same time, Edward reappeared, claiming he had a child with his ex-girlfriend, Shelley. Gina's family was worried about her not being able to have children, so this ready-made kid seemed like a solution to their problem. They were overjoyed. They pressured Gina into marrying Edward. I think Gina herself was probably happy about it. After all, she was already messing around with him before we even broke up. But unexpectedly, on the wedding day, she ran. It completely shattered my perception of her. I really didn't know this ex-girlfriend of mine at all. A bride running out on her wedding, leaving the groom alone to face all their friends and family. It's a miracle Edward could tolerate it. That hopeless romantic was willing to be the other man for her. What wouldn't he do? But it turned out Edward had a huge surprise of his own for everyone. He had claimed his ex, Shelley, had died tragically, leaving him to raise their child alone. But Gina accidentally discovered that Edward had been secretly contacting Shelley the whole time, using the Liu family's money to support her. He had just used the child as a bargaining chip to trick his way into the Liu family's trust and a marriage, all while using Gina's money to support his ex-girlfriend and their kid. What goes around comes around. But if Gina had cared even a little bit about that child, she wouldn't have been deceived for so long. When Gina left, she was a wreck. Then one night, at a team dinner celebrating record-breaking sales for the branch, I had a little too much to drink and was feeling dizzy. As I walked into my apartment complex, a dark figure suddenly rushed out from the side. I was just about to pull the pepper spray from my bag when I saw the person's face. It was Gina standing half in the shadows. I was just worried you might fall. You looked unsteady on your feet. You should worry about yourself. The new intern who started yesterday, Lily, works under me. She lives in the apartment across from mine. Gina's face flushed with anger. Let go of her. Who told you you could touch her? I leaned on the girl's shoulder. Do you have a problem with that? My ex-girlfriend. Gina's face paled. Did you find this girl just to spite me? Don't be so impulsive, please. I took the girl's hand. I held it up in front of Gina. We're already living together. Do we have any reason to lie to you? Gina stumbled back a few steps, devastated, and melted back into the darkness. I frowned and wiped the spot on my sleeve where she had touched me. Too bad, this shirt was new. Now I have to throw it out. Just being in the same space as her made my skin crawl. I led Lily away. Her voice was teasing. So, I hear we're living together now. Across the hall, close enough. Gina had been secretly following me for days. Calling the police was useless without evidence. There was nothing they could do. Since it had come to this, my only option was to call Edward. Edward rushed over, looking travel-worn. We met at a coffee shop. You must be feeling pretty pleased with yourself. Huh? He said, his face grim and tired. I'm curious. What do you think I'm pleased about? Women? Career? Money? If you mean the last two, then you're right. I am pretty pleased. If you're talking about women, well, I guess you could say that too. I pulled out my phone and showed him a picture of my girlfriend. See? Young, beautiful, and understanding. A woman is just the icing on the cake, you know? Edward's face turned ugly. He slammed his hand on the table and left. On his way out, just to save face, he paid our bill. I already knew, of course, that his family had gone bankrupt. After Gina found out she'd been scammed, she had cut him off financially a long time ago. I picked up my coffee and took a slow sip. I heard Gina didn't want to leave town, so Edward staged a suicide attempt. He jumped into the artificial lake in the park, but he was quickly pulled out by onlookers. The incident blew up. They were both taken in for counseling by the authorities. Maybe out of shame, Gina finally went back with Edward. But as soon as she returned, she started looking for a lawyer to file for divorce. Edward is completely dependent on her now. He's definitely going to cling to her for dear life. Those two have a long, messy road ahead of them. A pair of young arms wrapped tightly around me. Distracted? Looks like I'm not trying hard enough.